First thing first, we need to learn how to orientate the board. Take note that your lower right hand corner has to be a white square and not a shaded square. Okay, and our pieces are divided into two colors. So that means we can only play between two players. Each player will take one color. Okay, so I'm taking the white color and it's facing me now. Okay, my opponent will be taking the black color pieces. Now let's take a look at the arrangement of the pieces on the chessboard. As you can see, my pieces are arranged in two rows. The front row is occupied by the same pieces, which is the pawns. Okay, and the back row are occupied by the other pieces. Let's start from the side. Okay, we have the castles here, or we call them the rooks. Following that, we have the knight, which looks like a horse. Okay, neighboring to it, we have the bishops. Okay, now I'll introduce to you the queen. White queen will be on the white square, and the black queen will be on the black square, which is occupied by my opponent. And last but not least, we have the king. Okay, the king has a cross on top of it, so that differentiates itself from the queen. For the pawns, you can only move one step at a time. Okay? The only exception is the first step for that particular pawn. Okay, whereby it can move two steps straight away. But for its subsequent steps, it can only move one step at a time. Okay, when the pawns advance through the board, okay, let's say for example, it reaches the other end of the board, you can exchange this piece for any of your other pieces. So that means you can have more than two queens on the board. The only piece that you cannot exchange it for is another king. For example, you promote this pawn piece to, let's say, a queen. Okay, so that means you have two queens on the same board. Next, let's talk about the castle. Okay, if it's inside this little four squares here, okay, the castle can't move anywhere because there's no available space for it. Now it has a lot of space for it to move. How does the castle move? Okay, it can move either horizontally or it can move vertically. Next is the knight. Okay, unlike the castle that will be hindered or blocked, the knight cannot be blocked. Okay, so how does the knight move? Okay, it moves two squares up and one square to the right. Okay, so, or you can see it as 6 squares and it moves diagonally across. Okay, take note that this bishop comes from a shaded square. Okay, so it will always move in its shaded squares. So how does it move? It can only move in a diagonal direction. Okay, so for example, if it's here, it can move here, moves here, or it can move here. Okay, any of your shaded ones. So that's how it can move diagonally. Okay, I have another bishop that is on the white square. Okay, so for example, you can move here, 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 and diagonally across, no problem. Okay, but you cannot move in, let's say, a V shape like checkers. Okay, you cannot move like this in one turn. Okay, you've got to move it one turn, and on your next turn, you move it here. Okay, so that's for the bishop. The queen is the most powerful piece on the chessboard. Okay, it can move either horizontally, like the castle, okay, or vertically, like the castle as well. In addition to that, like the bishop, it can move diagonally as well. Okay, the king, similar to the pawns, can only take one step at a time. Okay, but unlike the pawns, it can actually move to the left, or it can move to the right, or it can move backwards. The pawns, on the other hand, can only advance until it promotes itself. Once the king is being captured by another piece, by your opponent, you lose the game. Okay, so the objective of the game is to protect your king from getting checkmate by your opponent. If it is occupied by an enemy piece, you can capture the piece, and that piece will be removed from the board. So in the case that the pawn moves 2 steps on its first move, and your opponent has another pawn position here, okay, the enemy can capture your piece by intercepting the 2 squares that the white pawn has moved. The next special move is something called castling, okay, whereby it involves the king as well as one of the castles, either this one or this side. I'm going to show you how do we do castling on both sides. Okay, so if there is no pieces blocking, okay, in between the king and the castle, shift the king 2 steps towards the castle and shift the castle to the other side of the king. Okay? The king cannot castle this side because there's a queen blocking now. Okay, so for example, if there isn't a queen blocking, okay, let's remove the queen. Same thing, shift 2 steps towards the castle and shift the castle to the other side of the king. Okay, so if there is, let's say, an attacking piece, okay, attacking either the king or it may be attacking the castle, okay, then you cannot do castling. Or if the piece is, let's say, attacking the area in between the king and the castle, you also cannot do castling. Okay, so for example, in this case, you cannot do castling at all for this side, but you can do castling for this side because nothing is attacking the pieces. In addition to that, the king and that particular castle that you are castling with should not have moved prior to castling itself. Okay, so that means the king and the castle has got to be stationary all the way, and the first step that they take is castling. So for example, if your king has moved before or your castle has moved before, you cannot do castling anymore. When your king is under attack by your opponent's piece, your opponent has to say check. Okay, so the king either runs away, or if possible, if there's another piece on the board, okay, it can protect itself. Okay, so for example, let's say the king shifts away, okay, and the opponent plays another piece here. Okay, now you see that your king is under attack by the queen, okay, because the queen can move diagonally, okay, and the king cannot move up on its turn because the queen will take the king on its next turn. You cannot shift to the left as well for the same reason. Okay, so if the king captures the queen, okay, the castle will attack the king. So in this case, we call this a checkmate, whereby the king has nowhere else to run and will be forced to surrender. Let's say in this setting, okay, the castle is attacking the king. I can shift the king, let's say, to this side. Okay, and you can see that on its next turn, let's say for example the king also shifts this side. Okay, I cannot shift my king up because it is under attack, okay, by the castle and both the king. I cannot shift the king to my left. In the case that it's not under attack and he has nowhere to go, this is what we call a stalemate. Another situation of a stalemate or a draw is when there is not enough attacking pieces on the board and both parties agree that there is no chance of winning, and so they agree to a draw. Okay, another case is where, let's say for example, I'm only left with a king on my side. Okay, and my opponent probably has other pieces. Okay, we have a 15 move draw. Okay, so that means if I lost my last piece and you can't capture my king within 50 moves, okay, it is considered as a draw.